Silence. Welcome to the Assembly of Silence Radio Hour.
And here we are. Here we are in a new place. Things keep changing. And the Assembly of Silence keeps changing too. So, with the dawning of this new year, not only are we going to start a new season, but we're going to have videos. I don't know if it's going to happen all the time, but we're going to kick it off this year with not only a new season, video, but also a new guest. I'm pleased to welcome Agah Bahari from the Neohuman podcast. Musician, an extremely interesting thinker, and a super nice guy. He agreed to come on our tiny little podcast here. So we had a wonderful conversation that could probably have extended for several more hours if there were no limits on that kind of thing. And thank God there are, because if we did nothing but talk about this kind of stuff all the time, we'd probably go stark raving mad. What else can be said about this? I hope you find it interesting. As usual, if you'd like to support these efforts, it's pretty simple. Even if you don't have any ducats in your pocket, you can always pass it around, although I understand that passing things around is the highest form of currency on the internet, and so people really reserve that for things that, number one, they love, and number two, they think they won't get punished for later. So I won't blame you if you don't pass it around. And with that, I don't think there's much else to say except enjoy the show. Agah Bahari. That's pronounced correctly?
Yeah, very good.
Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Where did you came across me, just out of curiosity?
I tend to follow Jason Reza Georgiani.
Oh, right on.
So whenever he does something, like if I can find what he's doing, I'll typically listen to most of whatever it is he's putting out there.
Yeah.
I find him to be a really interesting thinker, although I think most of the people who I find the most interesting, I tend to disagree with a lot. So I have a lot of disagreements with him, but so yeah, that's how I got to find out about you, and I've checked into your podcast, Neohuman, which you have a lot of really interesting guests on, and some really excellent conversation that pretty much covers a real wide range of territory. And I thought there's a few things that we might find interesting to discuss. I don't know what's on your radar right now. My sense is that with the number of things that are happening in the world, no matter where we start, we're going to end up covering a lot of it. So I don't know if there's something in particular that you've got going on right now or that you're thinking about that you'd like to begin with.
Yeah, I'm good either way. The magic of this medium really is the ability to talk to anybody, anywhere, at any time. And, the interesting part I would say the most interesting part of doing this to me is that we, as you said, we just talk about whatever. And at some point, we could get to a territory that is unknown to both of us, right? Because I might have some kind of a perspective, you have some kind of a perspective, and something new is being created as a result of the interaction between the two. And yeah. I'm very interested in that. What comes out of that is unknown to me. And, sometimes I'm surprised by it. Sometimes I'm surprised by my own way of thinking. So yeah, we can talk about, it's hard not talk about politics right now being in the United States. But what's interesting is everything is becoming software. And at some point, software will become artificial intelligence. So if you talk only about the topic of artificial intelligence, it will cover everything about human civilization if you have an honest discussion about it. So that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on some level, everything in that statement, like everything is software. Well, not really, but yes, in terms of what's happening with humanity, without a doubt, everything is being transferred to whatever extent possible into this medium. And yet the real world continues, and it, the degree to which there's
So
a
what's
correlation.
the definition of real?
Okay. You don't mess around, do you? So yeah, what is real? I mean, I know there's a lot of problems with that, but we could say that fundamentally there are kind of nested realities, and we live obviously on a planet that doesn't really care about our software. I mean, our software is going to have an impact on the planet, but our planet isn't running on the software that we're developing. We're living on this planet no matter what we do. I guess supposedly, if Elon and Bezos are successful, then we'll get off of this planet, or they will. But the planet is definitely not software, at least not the kind of software that we're writing. And you can extend that as far as you like. There's biology that doesn't much care about the software that we're writing, and there's physics, and you can kind of go on from there. But having said that, yeah, the substance of human life has been largely overtaken by the software that's being written. I wouldn't argue with that at all.
Yeah, I think what you said about the software that we are writing, they might not be the same software. I agree with that. And also, the software that we are writing hasn't dominated yet, because it has been around for a very short amount of time, relatively speaking. This planet has been around for more than 4 billion years, to the best of our knowledge, scientific knowledge.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so digitization has really started less than a century ago. But because technology has an exponential rate of advancement and progress, we don't really see the beginning of it. And by the time we become aware of it, it reaches that knee that will take a very sharp move of increasing of advancement. That if the advancement was happening once every couple of months, a couple of years ago, now it's happening once every couple of days. And at some point, it will turn into once every couple of seconds. And at that point, it doesn't really matter who we are and what we think about the software. But because our lives have become dependent on the software that we have developed, and this software has reached a point that is beyond the level of comprehension, biological comprehension, we will have a very in-depth and, I would argue, very bloody argument whether or not we have to merge with that system and carry on as something post-human, beyond human, human plus, transhuman, whatever the name of it is going to be. It's irrelevant.
Neohuman,
or
perhaps.
Are we going to,
Neohuman, perhaps.
Neohuman. Very interesting plug for my podcast right there.
There you go.
I appreciate it. Or are we going to stay this organic analog human that we have defined and we have valued and identified based on our own systems that we have developed over a couple of centuries, that include cultures and religions, even our sciences and arts and everything, all the tools that we have created to make sense out of this unknown and somehow create an objective goal, an objective destination, so we can define every other movements that we are making, because we need a context to define what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. Otherwise, everything just is, just wind blows and leaves go to different places and everything else shifts because of it, because there is some kind of a balance of energy.
Well, it seems to me that probably the point where we're having that conversation is right now. Because by the time you get to the point where we really can't understand what's happening anymore, where the rate of change is so great that every millisecond the world is changing, that's complete capture. It's done. We don't have an option anymore because we can't make sense of anything. So the conversation as to what our direction is from here, we may be kind of late at this point, even judging from what people like Musk and I think Stephen Hawking also made some noise about how frightening AI was before he left this world. So it seems to me, it seems that quite likely. And, the thing about exponential change is that it's exponential until it isn't, right? So there's only so far that anything can go before it hits some kind of a wall. And I don't know whether or not we could consider that to be the singularity, but there does seem to be some kind of a base, we're kind of, I guess quantum is extending the range of processing power potentially, but what are the artifacts of that? Hard to say. But we were, running up against Moore's law when it came to the distances within these circuits that can allow for things to increase in speed. So there are certain limits that we seem to be approaching, and the consequences of exceeding those limits are unknown. So I think your point of bringing the unknown into the conversation is huge because, well, really, when it comes down to any philosophical conversation, if you're not talking about what's unknown, then it's not really a philosophical conversation, if you ask me.
I mean, philosophical and mathematical. I had a guest named James Lindsay. He has a PhD in mathematics, but over the past couple of years, he has dedicated his life to fight this virus of wokeness.
Yeah, I've checked in with his work. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy. I love him. And we had a conversation, and he's an atheist. And I used to identify as an atheist.
Interesting.
But I've changed.
Yeah, me too. Oh, that might be an interesting thing to explore. Let's not go off on that now, but yeah, that's a very interesting thing.
So we talked about the concept of God and concept of unknown, and we talked about it from the perspective of mathematics. And he basically talked about the God that makes sense to him is the God that is defined on the infinity point, that it doesn't matter how large your numbers are, there are always numbers much, 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 much larger than that number that we just don't know about, right? So that ... you say like 1, 2, 3, 4, ... or whatever number ... He found God, or the interpretation of this placeholder God for the unknown, to be acceptable in that ... So
it's interesting.
I disagree that there is a wall. There is a wall that we have built based on our own perspective and our own comprehension of the amount of information that we receive. But it's the unknown, and unknown is a very scary thing for most people for evolutionary reasons. And I think definition of prophets and messengers throughout our history are people who dare look into the unknown and bring something back with them. Because a lot of people get to experience the unknown. You just smoke DMT, you go into unknown, and what you get out of it and what you experience, that's a whole different kind of a story, because that has nothing to do with the amount of psychedelics that you do. That has everything to do with your inner battle, ongoing battle with yourself. I don't know how much of what I'm saying makes sense, but there is a battle with yourself.
Of course, that makes perfect sense.
And so we get to a point that is the unknown for us, and it is the unknown beyond our ability, biologically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really need to make sense out of everything, because if you're living in a hunter-gatherer kind of a lifestyle in the woods, all you have to be aware of is, where is your next foods coming from? Where is the clean water? There's a really cool show called Alone, that they leave a bunch of people in the wilderness, like 20 of them or something, and they have to just survive. They have to build shelter and find water and find food, and whoever lasts the longest is the winner, get like $500,000. It's really interesting because some people who stay longer than maybe 25, 30 days, they get to the very core of, hey, what is the definition of who I am? What's the purpose of any of this? Because it's like you're peeling all these layers that you have gathered in order to fit within the structure of your society or your family or your religion or whatever. And when you get to the bare minimum of what you need to survive, then a lot of questions come up. And those are the very valuable questions that nobody teaches you. Those are the territories that most people they can't even imagine, the point of going to a place that they're not comfortable with.
Are there any common themes that you see happening when people are peeling away those layers? Is there sort of some essential basis that people are confronted with that's pretty much the same between different people?
Yeah, depression. And depression usually is something that is consistent because you go through different phases, but depression is like a space in between all of those for a while.
To what extent would that be an artifact of having come from a technological civilization and then kind of being placed in reality, let's say, for the first time? So having to struggle for your day-to-day survival within the context of a life that wasn't really an issue at all prior to that, right? At least not in the same way.
If you go and live in the wilderness, you mean?
I'm saying that the people who are participating in this program, the Alone show, right? They all presumably, part of civilization prior to, being a competitor, right? So they're coming from the context of civilization, let's call it. And so to what extent might like depression be an artifact of the disjunct between that previous experience, which is really the root of their experience, and the one that they're having on this show, which is getting them down to some down and dirty details that they probably had never even considered before, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think every single one of them who had families, at some point they broke because they missed their families. But there were people who were really good with their hands and they could build stuff, and they've trained basically for this lifestyle for many, many years. If they didn't have family, I think especially two women, that they were like, we can live here forever. They were like, fine. They built a shelter. They were fishing. They built a net. Like, they were hunting and then building clothing out of they were really savvy with that kind of a lifestyle. And I was like, well, we can just live here forever. What was interesting was that even if the money was the motivator initially, it was not a motivator for them to stay where they were, because they're like, I miss my family, or they were like, well, I just already did it. I can live like this for years, so there is no point in continuing. And they would just call people to come pick them up. They didn't even care about the money.
So in both cases, whether they were, able to deal with the surroundings or not, quite often the feeling was, well, what's the point of this?
Yeah. At some point you get to that point. Why am I doing this?
Well, in some ways, I would say that this is the kind of thing that would confront anyone that would decide not to live within the software.
Yeah. Or anybody who is really honest with himself or herself.
Right.
Because in a lot of ways, we're in autopilot mode. We're doing things because that's how they're supposed to be done. And we are operating on the basis of a context that most likely we haven't had much to do with creating it whatsoever. You're born in a family within a culture or religion or any kind of approach to life, interpretation of life, and your values and your ideals are built based on that structure that you fell into.
Right. But of course, that would be true of any species, right? You arrive, if you like, in a conscious being within some body in some species. And it's in the environment that species happens to be living in, or even that the group within the species. So there's a lot of different potential environments for us to all show up into. And we have, as far as I can tell, pretty much no say in that either. So it's a very natural circumstance.
Yeah, so I would say for animals, it seems to me that most of what they learn have everything to do with their survival. With humans, it goes a little more beyond survival. It's also the matter of meaning, matter of having a shared objective, again, to evaluate moves and move towards it. So I was born in Iran, for example. I was 1 second old. I was already labeled as a Shia Muslim Iranian straight male. None of those things had anything to do with my survival. None of it. If anything, they were against my survival, because At some point, I realized that Islam is not working for me, so I don't want to be Muslim anymore. But apostasy, leaving their religion in Islam, is punishable by death. That's why I always wonder about this number, 1.7 billion, when Westerners talk about, oh, there are 1.7 billion Muslims. Like, how many millions of those are willing to leave their religion today if their lives were not threatened, if they did not have a threat of alienation? Right? But it was placed on me because I was part of a collective. I was part of a tribe when I was being born in that setup, right? And for a lot of people is that, hey, why bother? You know, we just navigate our way through this and deal with it and live the best life that we can. You know, nice couch, nice house, nice car. But I would say some people, their DNA is the DNA of people who wander around and they ask questions and they're not satisfied with what they're given. And that's the biggest difference to me between humans and animals, that we can opt out of the situation that we are born into. Psychologically, even physically, emotionally, probably emotionally is the hardest of them all. But emotion is an instrument of ego, so that makes total sense.
So it has to do with the reflexive property, the ability to see one's
with our
own
tools.
state. Yeah.
With our tools, you know, and that's where technology becomes spiritual to me. That,
well, those tools can
really
be
evolved.
They can be either tools within consciousness or physical tools. And that's where I would draw the distinction, incidentally, just to get back to the other point of whether or not there's a limit. Like, yeah, consciously, I don't think there is ever really a limit. So the potential within that domain is endless. But I think that the physical domain has hard limits that occur not only as a result of the basics of the configuration of the physics of the universe, but also because of the transition points that happen when materials being converted to one form to another. You know, you got opportunity within a certain range, a certain time frame when the material is in one configuration, and then whatever it is you're going to do to it is going to convert it into some other form. And that means that whatever it is you were doing before is going to have a limit placed on it. You know, that's kind of, I think.
Yeah, so Moore's law is a very good example of that.
Yeah,
that you mentioned.
Exactly. Yep.
So we are reaching the limit of silicon, but we've already made the leap towards quantum computation.
But again, we don't know what exactly that's gonna.
No, we don't.
You know.
No, we don't. We've never known. That's the thing. We have never known. They've always been. I guarantee, there have always been people who've said, "This is all we need to have in our life, in our civilization." And there were another group of people, much smaller, way more stubborn, who were like, "Well, I wonder what will happen if I do this." You know?
And I think that group, that smaller group, gets larger as environmental pressures come to bear. So it's like, for a while, you can have that traditional majority saying, you know what, we've got this thing sorted out. Let's just keep doing it the way we've been doing it. But then, particularly if population continues to grow and if environmental conditions, make it more difficult, if resources dwindle or what have you, then the motivation to find a different way is, kind of kicks in.
It becomes a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting that there is something within human nature that desires that, because regardless of the scale, it can happen on a civilizational scale. It can also happen in a music band that you're like 5 people in a band and 1 guitar player is like, this has happened to me maybe 3 times, that we were in a band playing gigs and it's good, you get chicks, you get money, but you start to wonder, well, what will happen if I add to these chord structure and make it a little more complex? Instead of 4/4, I do like 7/8.
You won't get as many chicks.
No, and then your band members are like, "What's wrong with you, man? We're doing good. We're fine."
Yeah.
You're telling us to practice more and earn less. Why would you do that? But if you continue doing this and you get an album together and release that album, then it becomes something that they couldn't have even imagined, something like this being created. And then you kind of upgrade. You
maybe
become more open.
Well, Yeah, I think that that's certainly a possibility. So it's an upgrade. I have this theory that when it comes to consciousness versus material, there's kind of an inverse relationship. So the degree to which consciousness is expanding is the degree to which you're tethering to the material becomes more tenuous. And so, you could say like a band that's really focusing on success, material success, is going to be relatively slim on the musical side of things. But, those who might be more, let's say, successful within the musical realm quite often don't really see a lot of material success. And, there are maybe some good balance points in there somewhere. I know that there are some bands that are quite successful that I really like, and there's some really shitty music that I really like too, that so you can't really completely dismiss all that simple stuff that makes the money. Some of it's great.
Oh, absolutely.
But when it comes to consciousness expanding, you know?
Yeah. I'm talking about from the individual, I guess, individual growth is not a good term, but individual evolution kind of a point.
Development.
Because
maybe.
if you have that itch within your brain to do something more, you are not going to be satisfied with having material success. It has happened many times in the art world that you see that a lot of people, they gain material success, but because they've given up that freedom to be creative artists and do whatever they want to do, they do a lot of other shit, whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever, and they just lose all their money.
That can happen.
They lose all their money and they've lost their chance to express themselves. But there are some people who are perfectly happy with material stuff, and that's perfectly fine. If you, it goes back again to you. What is it that gives you the sense of freedom? Because it's about freedom. Happiness, I think, is temporary.
Yeah,
and it happens here and there. But to sell it as an end product is a total scam.
Absolutely, happiness is accidental. You're lucky if it just sort of shows up in the middle of this or that. And that's the best way to approach it. Having it as a goal is an absurdity.
Yeah, and it's also when the goal is happiness, the price that you're paying for it is that 50% there's a chance that you're going to be sad because you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
You've defined something that guarantees misery for the rest of your life, because happiness is not solid, is not objective. It's the perfect shifting the goalposts. That if you are following a priest or following a spiritual guru or a politician, they can always change those goalposts until the day that you die and collect the money that you're sending them just to give you this drug that is hope. That is the most powerful drug of all. That tomorrow is going to be better than today. There is no such a thing.
I can't believe that people keep falling for the hope one. It's unbelievable at this point. But yeah, I guess we have buttons that are pretty reliable when you push them. And particularly, I think as things get more desperate and people feel more out of control, hope is what people cling to. So it's pretty simple, I guess, if you're able to convince them that you're going to offer them some hope. It's always a question of hope of what? Obama's whole thing was hope and change. But he didn't really say like what it was that the change was going to be.
Yeah, they took the name and change. I would say change more than hope was something that a lot of people bought into with Obama. That things are going to be different, and people are like, "I'm for that." I'm done with war and all of that, and he scammed them.
And now, of course, they're running towards the status quo.
Oh yeah.
Now they're like, "Oh, give us back, give us back, old Joe."
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane. I will never believe that Joe Biden won this election, especially with 80+ million votes. It's just insane, and obviously, United States as a republic is under attack by. It really is not Democrat, Republican, right, left. It's globalist or nationalist. And that's where we are. And we'll see how this goes. But the United States definitely is something worth fighting for. And the only person who had emerged who was willing to really like this, idiot who would just love America. And I totally understand it because I was that guy for most of my life in Iran. Just, I just love America. America is great. And Donald Trump is that person. And it's great. It's awesome. America first shouldn't be offensive to any person who's willing to live in the United States. Anybody who doesn't like it needs to get the fuck out of here. And it's this openness of the system that, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, I said it to Jason Reza Georgiani too, that quote that tolerance of intolerance is cowardice. That's exactly what it is. You have to, again, going back to context, what is the American context? What is it that you want to be aligned, especially in this time when you have China, a centralized system that is not bound by any kind of a cultural or religious or ethical boundaries? How are you going to catch up with them if you're going to argue over who's going to use what bathroom? Or whether or not you can defend yourself, whether or not private property is a good thing. You're going to lose like that when you have someone, not a competitor, an enemy that is so focused and so on point, spot on with every move that they're making.
Well,
you just cannot
here's
compete
the problem
like
is that, coherency within a people is very much the measure of their strength. So when you have liberty as a fundamental tenet of a political system, it becomes incredibly difficult to get coherency within that system. And we're seeing that ever more, as time goes on, particularly as we have, let's face it, a lot of duplicitous actors who are intentionally fomenting ever more division amongst the population. So we're in a real bind in many respects because the basis of our political ideology makes it very difficult to resist the tactics that are being used against us. And I completely agree that,
Yep.
I don't claim to know. Let's just to be completely rigorous about this, I don't really have any knowledge of what happened in this election, but it sure is fishy that they lost seats in the House and prevailed in the presidency somehow. Just the whole way the thing played out, it's fishy.
Well, look, there are many hours of hearings on state level: Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia.
But even that is all.
There are videos.
Even that is all polluted with duplicitous actors fomenting confusion.
Yeah, but the point is, if they really want a clean presidency, they have to be on top of it before the Trump team. To be like, hey, look into as much as you want. We want this fair and square, and we want to govern without any kind of a headache. A poll came out today. Gallup poll came out today that Donald Trump has passed the record of Barack Obama to be the most admired man by Americans.
It's incredible.
Donald Trump is the most admired man. Michelle Obama is the most admired woman. It is incredible. Donald Trump percentage is 18, I think. Joe Biden's percentage is 6.
Right. Yeah. They picked the biggest duds. I mean, when it came to like actual democracy, they had a bunch of candidates that people actually liked who were running for that position. And they basically dismissed all of them and picked 2 of the worst of the bunch. I'm not aligned with either political party. I basically hold the view that they're all corrupt at this point, including Trump. I go back and forth a little bit about whether or not he's a genuine actor. I just can't tell. There's some of the statements that he makes are just so like, dude, why the fuck are you saying that? Except to play into the other side. And if you're doing that, well, then clearly the producers are telling you to do that. And he's a reality TV star, man. So he's worked with producers for years. You know what I mean?
So I think the way to appreciate Donald Trump is to think of him as a psychedelic. I did a segment about that.
Are you familiar with the Allegro theory of Jesus?
Oh yes, absolutely.
John Allegra?
Yeah, it was a mushroom. Yeah.
Okay, so Donald Trump as a psychedelic. Run with it, man.
I tell you why I came to that conclusion. I think it was April of 2019. I used to do daily live streams, and there were different segments. And in one of them, I came across this article on Fox News that Chelsea Handler, who is a comedian, and she was a never Trumper, she said that she had such a big trouble with Trump winning that she got hooked on marijuana, and she had to go to a psychiatrist for many months. But then she realized what really bothered her about Trump was the stuff about her own life that Trump was bringing up from her childhood. And I was like, that's it. That's exactly what happened to me with psychedelics. But the problem is she went right back to hating on Trump, to thinking of him as a man, not a spirit of what he was representing, which really is, we used to joke about when I was in film school in Vancouver with my roommate, who we did a lot of psychedelics together, that how much acid would it take to put in a water source to just get everybody high on acid and make some kind of a fundamental change. And it wasn't that much, surprisingly, if you do the math. But Donald Trump is that on a global scale. Nobody expected him, and nobody expected him to remain in power for 4 years. And everybody just flabbergasted by him. He has no shame. He has no ethical and moral high ground or a standard. He showed the world what he was all about after his inauguration, when he got out of the car in front of Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. That's the beautiful part about Trump, that he does not give a fuck. He perhaps is a nihilist, if it wasn't because of the brand Trump, because that's all he cares about. He cares about the brand Trump. He's a representative of that brand.
Yeah.
But when you have the other side talking about, hey, you know what, China, just don't talk about China. We want to talk about Russia. Yeah. Because they've all sold out to the highest bidder. The news that came out with that Swalwell, with that Chinese spy, and all of those people. Donald Trump is like he's a psychedelic. He's a psychedelic. He has shown who we really are, who people really are, what the system really is made out of. And we'll see, we'll see where this whole thing is headed.
That says it right there. What he shows is that the system is made out of brand loyalty, and that, branding is really a late stage of capitalism. The basic infrastructure, right. What he harkens back to with his base is, Make America Great Again, which is, the industrial strength, the world superpower, this kind of social cohesion that we felt. World War II, I think, would be, where the last time where we all banded together and kind of did something as a nation, And so that kind of entrepreneurial and patriotic spirit is something that has been lost. And in many respects, it's been lost because we went through that conversion from the raw material, let's get the job done, to let's see how much we can make from this, which is gaining an advantage. It has to do with branding and advertising. And that's Trump's forte. He was there in the middle of that game, pushing the real estate market on the basis of his name, and then leveraging that in order to become a celebrity, which has nothing to do with any real work, right? He was the representation of American entrepreneurship and success. But it's a very mixed bag. He's not like a hard knocks, made it from the bottom of the barrel American success story. And neither is he a guy who's had like really excellent record of being able to do all the deals that he's made. He's had a mixed kind of, controversial, let's say, career. And in many respects, that also, I think, is something where a lot of what happened with Trump was in the courts, as opposed to within, making business happen. Like people were always being sued, and that was a big part of the game. And again, this is late stage civilization stuff. right? Because earlier in a civilization, you're not going to have these like, well, it reminds me, maybe a good way to cap that is there's a Taoist phrase that says something along the lines of, in the time of the big names, the day of reckoning is near.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I think, Trump is like, he's got that stamp of like, dude, I have made the most of this name and this is what I stand by. And so on some level, everything he represents to the people who are enthusiastic about bringing back America's greatness is really just not what he actually is. That's not who he's been. Sad to say.
So Trump is not perfect. Magic mushroom grows on cow shit.
Yeah, there's a similar Taoist phrase too. The best rice grows in shit. Yep.
Yeah, there you have it. So, I don't think there is any such a thing as objectively good or bad person. People are complex people who, complex being who make decisions based on circumstances that they're dealing with.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%.
Whatever is the intention behind that,
yeah,
that's for someone else to deal with.
I mean, there are also, human weaknesses that arise given different circumstances that cause people to behave in ways that would be maybe we would hope for something other than that. Although if we were placed in the same position, I'm not sure that we would behave much differently. I think, quite often.
Yeah, who knows? We just don't know.
No, we don't know.
I want to go a little deeper about what he represents, though, because it has everything to do with where we are.
Okay.
No, there is no sense of unity because most people don't have skin in the game the way that they did in the 40s or the 50s. Most people, the younger generation, they can't even imagine owning a home or owning a land or anything like that. And it's interesting that their priorities is also designed by the system that is against them.
Tell me about that. I'd like to hear you expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a quote by Gore Vidal that we don't even know what our cage looks like because we have never seen it from the outside.
That's right.
And this also goes back to simulation hypothesis that, when we talk about reality could be a simulation, we don't even have to go in a major scale. This reality that we are experiencing that is built around our culture and corporate ethical compass itself is a simulation, is the very definition of a Truman Show, that you're fine for as long as you operate within it, but the moment you get out of it and see it from the outside, it's so ugly and so unfair and so corrupt that you will have difficulty going back to it without remembering what you've seen.
But I think it's really interesting to wonder the extent to which it could ever be any other way, because on some basic level, we're dealing with competition that's pretty fucking ugly. If you take a look at human history, there's no point that looks really good. It's a bloodbath through most of it. And so the narratives that are necessary in order to bind people together so that they can have a good feeling about what they're doing while they're fucking shit up, how would you structure it, without really changing the way the game is played?
Well, that's exactly is the point. That is exactly the point, the narrative. And that is exactly the point I was going to go a little deeper with respect to Trump. That Trump is the manifestation of the era of multiple narratives and democratization of creation, interpretation, and distribution of narratives with the use of smart devices and social media. Because before that, you had limited number of TV channels and newspapers who all were giving you different interpretations of the same essence, same spirit, that there is a business going on in this country, the military industrial complex or whatever, and everything else should act according to that business. There shouldn't be any kind of a disruption. There shouldn't be any kind of a sudden movements and all of that. And that narrative created for American people for many, many decades. Before that, there were limited radio channels, limited newspapers. Right. So we are in a very, very interesting point, and we have absolutely no idea what the fuck we're doing. I use the expression, we're monkeys with machine guns.
Yeah.
That's what we are.
there's a number of really interesting ways of characterizing this. And one like traditional way of looking at it would be that this is New Babylon. You know, the confusion of tongues, the inability of people to understand what each other are saying. You know, such a multiplicity of points of view that no one's able to get anything done, and the tower falls, right? So that's one possibility. Yeah. Another one is that we're brushing up against reality, more kind of like that alone, you know, in an intellectual sense, in consciousness, we're being confronted with some really elemental things that have to do with sense making, and that contradiction is fundamentally a monkey wrench inside of sense making. And yet at the same time, contradiction is real and true. There's a way in which the basis of things that are actually occurring in the world that we perceive have contradictory aspects to them, and yet we don't have a sense-making capability that knows how to embrace contradiction. I don't know if you're familiar with astrology at all, but I work with it a little bit, and one of the things that I find really interesting is the relationship between Gemini and Sagittarius, which happen to be opposite to each other in the chart. Sagittarius is associated with the sage, someone who has knowledge, is able to peer into the meaning of things. And opposite to that is Gemini. Gemini is far more fundamental. It's an uncomfortable split. I describe it as a seed which has germinated. Part of it is reaching up towards the sun, and part of it is digging down into the ground. So it's one thing, but it's completely at disagreement within itself as to which way it needs to go. And that's what needs to happen in order for development to occur. That's the basis for all energetic phenomena, for all life, you could say. And those two things are opposite to each other. And we have a very difficult time within the realm of knowing, of knowledge and understanding, coming to grips with this very basic kind of polarity. And on a certain level, that's what we're being confronted with in cyberspace. You could say that all of these different narratives now are coming together, and we're seeing all the threads, and we're seeing the way in which, there's a little bit of sense over there, there's a little bit of sense over there, but those two things don't get together. You know, it's how do you bring all of that together into a coherent narrative that can help us to return to functionality?
So that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Things are going to get much weirder. And
I tend to agree with you. Although I think that the effort that I'm making here, and I don't know whether you feel like you're doing this too, is to somehow or another bridge that, to somehow or another transcend the continued disintegration of things. Although I do tend to agree with you that maybe that's a fool's errand. I don't know whether you feel like that's part of what you're doing in your work online here, but that's certainly part of what's motivated me to do this. Although quite often now I feel like, well, am I just spinning my wheels? Is this really worth the effort? I still think it's important. I really treasure these kinds of conversations, and you know, God willing, maybe it will have a beneficial effect. But often I wonder. It just seems like there's an awful lot baked into the pie right now.
Well, the podcast topic, I really am doing it for selfish reasons. I enjoy those conversations immensely. And there is no other opportunity for me to, for example, sit and talk for an hour with John McAfee or Michio Kaku.
Oh, I got to check out the John McAfee. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's insane, you know. And, you know, John McAfee, I think he was like episode 60 something. So I've done like 60 episodes, but I still had like butterfly in my stomach before it. And I was like, dude, I better cancel this. I don't know. But I went through it. And on the other side, I was like, this is the greatest shit I've ever done in my life. Like, this is awesome. I can't see
that's awesome.
myself stopping ever. Like, I want to talk to anybody. You know, I can sit and talk to a homeless person in San Francisco to the anger of my girlfriend for like 20 minutes. And the guy reveals things that you were like, why are you telling me these kind of things? But then I follow my own philosophical framework called Agahology.
I was going to ask you about that because I looked that up and it's very interesting.
So my mission in life for myself is to receive information, create information, and share information in order to understand the nature of God that I am a projection of it, and so is everything else. And this goes back to defining the energy as opposite, because I don't see it as opposite. I see both of them as part of the same thing.
Amen.
It's just the third law of motion, that any action has equal and opposite reaction. And that is defined within the context of energy.
Right.
We define it for ourselves as opposite or in favor, good and bad, right and wrong. So yeah, that structure is falling apart because it is not a natural structure. It's a structure that we have built as a tool, and it has worked for as long as it has, but we have absolutely no chance of determining and establishing that narrative as a superior narrative in the age of artificial intelligence and democratization of information and social media, that basically every single human being experiencing life on this planet would have a very different interpretation of it if we were experiencing it as parts of a whole. It's like waves in the ocean. There are different shapes, different forms in a very impermanent kind of a way, but they're all part of a bigger body of this water. So that's how I see it. And there are times that I obviously feel that, hey, this is bad, this is good, this is right, this is wrong. But then I have to wonder, that battle that I'm saying, that you constantly go with it, that at some point it's not a battle anymore. It's kind of like, yeah, it's a mutual understanding that what is it that is triggering me to define this thing as right or wrong, as good or bad, because it's always something about me. It's not something about that thing. Otherwise, things just happen.
Well, I think that you really spelled out a beautiful spiritual message that is, I agree, the core of all real spiritual paths. And, part of what I'm tempted to say now is that, all of the political considerations are in many respects opposite to that, because politics is always creating that division. It's very difficult not to want to condemn whatever it is you see as being evil. So within the context of what we see happening right now, there are a lot of players that are easy to want to condemn. And there's so many different people who you could choose to demonize in that way. Everyone has their favorites, and immediately it takes you out of that realm where you're considering the possibilities that would create the framework, like stepping outside of the medium within which you're in. I can't remember the analogy you used before, but it's perfect. Kind of like the no one sees the prison that they're contained in, that Gore Vidal quote that you had. So the ability to step out of that is to not take that oppositional position. I think you're absolutely right that the opposition is a false way of describing it. But on the other hand, it's a very natural way of taking a stance, because we get back to this struggle within nature. We have, material needs, and we come up against conflicts. And so we take a stance against in order to be able to prevail. It's an incredibly basic natural urge. So to some extent, it's built into the biology. And that's why, again, I think, material and spiritual domains have this kind of inverse relationship to each other. So we're being pushed towards the spiritual domain in a certain sense now because of what we're confronted with. And also recognizing, like, the people in Alone who are participating, they get to this point where it's like, I'm just struggling for survival and this is pointless, right? So on some level, I think humanity is starting to get to this point. Like, one of the things we talk about in Chinese medicine is that there's an overall decline in what's called the Jing. The kidney Jing is considered the kind of basic wellspring of energy that the body has to work with. It's considered ancestral. You inherit it over time, but it gets depleted over time. And they're noticing that more and more people are having kidney kidney deficiency. And so in a certain sense, we're like kind of getting to the end of some part of the narrative, you could say, and at the same time that the physical structure of our species is starting to lose its essential power. I mean, we know that most of us are a shadow compared to people 100 years ago in terms of their physical endurance and all that kind of thing. They may not have lived as long, but they were tough, you know? And when you go back and consider what they did in the ancient world, wow, you know, that's some pretty heavy duty fortitude. So we're getting to this point now where there's kind of like a crossing of the lines where as the decline of the physical manifestation of the species happens, the ascension of the spiritual. And it's difficult to not get, none of us want to die. It's kind of one of the most fundamental things. Like, even though we may recognize that it's kind of pointless to just fight it out and struggle to survive on this subsistence level that they take you to on these programs when you go out into the jungle and they dump you there with a camera, we may recognize that, but that's not like, oh, okay, well, I'm ready to go. Thank you very much. I'm done. You know, there's still this sense of like, there's something here to be done. And the question is, well, what is that? What are we here? What are we here for? What do we need to do in order to fulfill the gift that we were given in this life? That's the question that I'm always confronted with.
Yeah, well, that's a fundamental question that a lot of people throughout our history try to come up with the answer and direct people towards certain kind of a direction. But I believe if it's centralized, it's not natural. And when it's centralized, it's a concentration of power, and inevitably it'll become corrupted. I don't think that we are being pushed towards anything. It's just that, you know, the essence of reality, I would say, it's consciousness, and it manifests itself in a decentralized kind of a manner. It's like water. You can't block the way of water for maybe a century, but eventually it will break through that barrier and fill everything up. And we're dealing with that right now.
I think that's true, but I think it's also like, if we're clear about defining the domains that we're talking about, when it comes to consciousness, absolutely. But when it comes to the material world, we are kind of being pushed in various ways if we're not willing to die. So in order to continue, there are various things we have to do, and we are pushed in order to fulfill those things. And also, I think in the software world that we're inhabiting, even if it's only on the basis of censorship, we are being pushed in a certain way. So the various manipulations that are happening here, like whether or not this video, when I upload it, is going to be demonetized, or they're going to shut down search engine results that might have it in it.
Well, it's done by humans.
Yeah. It's pushing us in various ways, though, right? We're being...
Yeah, but that shouldn't be a surprise. We were being pushed by the church for many centuries. We were being, people in the Middle East are being pushed by interpretation of political Islam in that region.
Absolutely.
And we're being pushed by interpretations of big tech and government, that now, if the centralized government and centralized big tech merge together, and it seems to be inevitable, and that would be the only option available to humanity, that would be the most disastrous kind of an outcome for human spirit and liberty and all of these things that we talk about, that fundamentally they're values. We can argue that it is what it is, but obviously it's better to be free than being imprisoned.
Yes, but are we free? Are we really free?
Well, that's the thing. Relatively speaking, you're more free than...
Have we ever been really free?
I don't even think we understand the definition of real free.
Well, I think there's two domains again. That we have spiritual freedom in terms of our willingness and ability to consciously explore all possibilities that arise within the psyche, if you like, something along those lines. And then we have the sort of material freedom. Are we like in chains, unable to, move about and make the best of whatever it is our circumstance is? Those are different stories, I think. On some basic level, I think freedom is always fundamentally within consciousness. That material
freedom sounds a little oxymoronic, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Material is the essence of material is certainty.
Well, the essence of material
you can't buy something, like you can't buy a piece of furniture and the guy is like, it looks like this now. I don't know what it looks like in 3 days.
Yeah.
But that's the essence of freedom.
Well, it seems like from my point of view, the essence of material is change. That material is ever going through these configurations of matter and energy, and that you're always going to inevitably end up with it being a completely different thing with a whole bunch of byproducts and stuff like that you didn't anticipate. All of that is a tough thing to navigate. The reason why science places so much emphasis on the ability to predict is because we want to try to manage the configurations that are happening within the material domain. But, quite often, whatever it is that we figure out has a bunch of unintended consequences that down the line cause more problems.
Absolutely.
So it seems to me that when we're really talking about freedom, it's always within the domain of consciousness, that's really the only, and in a certain sense, it gets back to this idea that everyone has their own personal relationship with God.
Yes. And also, I think it's extremely important within this context to realize the importance of that in God we trust at the back of the US dollar. That if you're not familiar with what we were talking about, you're like, well, you should take it away because some people don't believe in God and that's offensive to them. But a far bigger meaning of that is that your most basic rights that has been recognized by the US Constitution as God-given or natural, they are not to be messed with by the government, by the state. And I think that's where we are, that you have a centralized, very successful system in the form of the Chinese Communist Party, who rely on surveillance, on social credit system that is completely possible on a global scale by the use of technology, centralized technology. Maybe we can interpret that based on what you said into a material kind of a freedom, that we will have everything we would ever want, materially speaking, but we would not have the chance to explore the depth of the unknown, that our consciousness is the direct link to it. This experience that we are having, the self-experience that we are having of this life, this unique experience and interpretation, is only a part of the bigger stream. If we are thinking like that, you can define it as God or whatever, then the other direction, other kind of certainty that is being provided by central big governments and states is completely in contradiction to that. And I think that's where we are. And it's really interesting that psychedelics are about to become legalized, because if we think that we now have problem with differences of interpretation and narratives, just wait until some of these people get hooked on some heavy psychedelics and it become okay to talk about it and manifest it. It's really interesting times ahead.
Absolutely. I completely agree. We're actually at kind of an interesting pivot point right now in terms of this episode, because we've already spoken for an hour, and yet at the same time, we're on the precipice of, I think, some of the most important and interesting material. There are things to discuss here that will probably take another hour to do justice to. So I'm wondering whether, if we were to wrap it up now, could I get assurances from you that we can follow this up with another discussion, or should we just go for it now and then I'm confronted with 2 hours to figure out how to edit? Because no one's going to fucking listen to 2 hours. I know it's a stretch even to get people to listen to an hour. So what do you say, my friend?
Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I think maybe we wrap it up here and you see if some of your listeners have any kind of a question or perspective or interpretation of what we talked about, then maybe we can talk about. I'll be happy to come back on your show.
Well,
maybe for another episode.
I'll just make a little footnote here so that we have kind of a reference point. But I think the thing that's most interesting is to really delve into the CCP and its model for structuring civilization compared to the one that we're working with here. And my belief is that we can actually point to evolutionary biology as an indicator of what it is that's going on here, that there's actually a deep history precedent for what's happening. And then the question of individual how shall we put it? Autonomy, the sense of being of the individual within these different systems, and perhaps like the prophetic tradition in terms of this, the concept of the abomination of desolation from Daniel, for instance. These are all things that I think are deeply linked and would make for a really interesting follow-up. So I hope I can convince you to do that at some point. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. It was really a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
We'll talk to you again in the future, and take care. God bless.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening. We look forward to serving you again soon. In the meantime, remember, turn that thing over a few times before you pick it up and take it home.